Morning. Happy Sunday, everybody. Welcome to our Sunday Natural Health News live show here. We are 8 weeks strong of hosting this Natural Health News live show to equip you and your families with news about COVID-19 and the coronavirus, as well as information and powerful resources to help all of you feel healthy and safe during this pandemic. So welcome to all of you joining. Happy Sunday morning. This is a casual morning for us here. And Gabriel and I just had breakfast, and he's upstairs watching a movie. So you might hear a lot of noise and craziness happening upstairs, but welcome everybody. Today, I had you all vote on, actually, I've got the poll right. Yes, I had you all vote yesterday on the topic for today. And so I gave you several options, and almost 40%, 39% wanted to talk about blood pressure management, particularly as it relates to COVID-19, this being the number one underlying health condition of the cases that are the most severe cases. And I know a lot of you are concerned about blood pressure and management of cardiovascular health. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the root causes of blood pressure challenges, even some testing that most of the time your cardiologists are not running that they really should be. And so there's a whole bunch of connection to some hormones within your body, as well as neuroendocrine balancing that we can employ to help balance your blood pressure. So we'll get into that particular topic. That's in the second part of today's Natural Health News. The first part is what I'm going to go into now, news of the day regarding the virus. So globally, we're at 3.4 million cases, and the US has 1.15 million cases. New York is 312 cases alone. New Jersey's 123, and that's 123,000 in New Jersey. Massachusetts has moved up to 66,000. Illinois is moving up. They're at 58,000. And I've been monitoring Georgia. We're basically almost fully open. So we're at 28,000 cases and rising. So I also want to share with you internationally large national community here on particularly Instagram and YouTube. And I have Facebook on. Facebook is over there, Instagram, and then YouTube up there. France extended their state of health emergency to the end of July. So July 24th is when they have extended their emergency state. And that also is going to extend to, if individuals travel to France, there will be a two-week quarantine. And many of you who follow me on the regular, you know, we were, you know, as most of us, we had an amazing 2020 plan. Brian and I had our wedding. It was a coronavirus postponement. I was supposed to have a postdoctoral 6-week clinical fellowship program for additional certification in lymphatics in Germany. And then that plan was I would be in a van, living the van life, doing the training at the college, and then on weekends, and over one extended stay, I'd be traveling through France and Germany. So that all has been completely wiped for at least this year, hopefully not next year on all fronts. But I'm following Germany and France, particularly because those were places that were on my travel schedule for the summer. Italy, the death toll actually increased. They had an increase of 475,000 cases. Yesterday, that increased, and the cases have remained stable, but for whatever reason, they had a major increase in deaths. This U.S., for all of you tuning in, I want to welcome all of you. Good morning. Let me know where you're tuning in from, so I just know where you guys are following and what cities, states, and countries you live in. Here in the U.S., we are at over 30 million Americans who have lost their job and at least have filed for unemployment. So there's still documentation, a lot of challenges with that space, particularly 40-year-old software systems in the state run unemployment systems. And so I know I have a lot of friends in Florida who have filed for unemployment, having challenges, waking up early in the morning. Now they're going to physical paper to file. So it's very challenging for a lot of folks, and we'll probably see that, there's obviously more than 30 million, but we definitely are feeling it here. 30 states in the US have begun reopening, and easing social distancing measures and restrictions. One of the things that we are not seeing are extensive, extended stay-at-homes. Like Michigan definitely did extend their state of emergency, but there's still going to be some lifting of social distancing. I do want to highlight, and I hope none of you take any of my communication about what's going on as news as criticism to folks that might be choosing not to stay at home. I know that a lot of the information can trigger folks in ways where you might get frustrated, anxious, or angry. And I know some of it has actually been directed at me. So I just want to kind of note, hey, I am a messenger here, and I really am trying to minimize any type of swaying in terms of my stance on things. But I definitely do have a strong stance on you making individual choices for your health and wellness. And I think one of the things that's happening is there's a lot of misinformation. So I hope you know here when you tune in that you're going to get statistics, facts, and information that is scientifically founded, epidemiologically oriented in its nature. So there is something that is increasing that it's actually called social distancing shaming. And it's also connected into social media. So there are some trends, and I've seen the memes. We've probably all seen these memes. It's, the COVIDiots and then Florida morons are really big. And so what the communication, I read an article yesterday, was that social now, like this weekend, and I even highlighted it yesterday, like one of the Roswell moms Facebook page, actually this mom, I think they were just in the car, but they were taking photos of all the bars and restaurants, and clearly there was no social distancing. So I saw it and reported on it. Now, I don't know anybody who is out there, but at any rate, there's definitely a degree of frustration that people are now moving to using social distance or the social distancing or lack of it. And this includes mask wearing. People are taking this now to the social threads with businesses and posts. And then, some shaming is happening. So be it what it is, that is something that we're now seeing. Letitia, oh my gosh, Letitia gave us a live chat. Yay, $20. That made my morning. Thank you. She says, good morning, and thank you for the daily lives and sharing everything. Hearts and kisses. Thank you so much. I am so grateful. That totally makes my day. So thank you. Thank you. So what I want to highlight this because, for instance, there are code infringements and violations happening, and people are actually posting about businesses. This one gentleman was in a pizza shop, and the guy making the meat and the cheese for the pizza, he had not his mask up here. So let me take a little sip of my coffee. By the way, my caffeine and quarantine mug, it's available on Etsy. So I've got links down below, as well as my Keep Calm and Socially Distant. You guys love this tank. I actually love it. It's very thick and soft. So, okay. So the guy who was making the pizza was not like this. He had his mask like this. Well, that's not adhering to the CDC guidelines. So somebody got really upset, posted it, and the business completely blew up. Same thing, apparently, a publicist or some guy in marketing in Miami had a coworker business social on his balcony on some high rise, downtown Miami, or not Miami, but like on the waterfront. And people from other balconies took a picture of him and tagged him, and he has taken a huge hit nationally with his business. So to that note, the same thing is happening with the beach closure protesting, as well as the protesters that are going to the capitals and protesting, often not wearing masks. So I'm going to tell you a story. There was a medical doctor, a cardiologist, who went to a Wisconsin rally and was snapped a picture of him, and it trended socially. and he acknowledged that it was him, and he was not wearing a mask or social distancing as seen in the picture. And his medical group, where he does his had his cardiology practice, they let him go because he violated the terms of contractual engagement. And it's also, some ethics components there in the medical world. Just the irony as a cardiologist, the biggest underlying health concerns, as we're going to address today, are heart related conditions. And so he might be working with and engaging with some of the most susceptible individuals, and he is not social distancing and exposing himself to massive groups of people. They found that in violation of his contract, and he was fired. So just know that. And I've got a lot of comments on that. So, that is definitely the one thing that we have to take ownership on what we do. And, our family, we are choosing to be socially distant and will remain to do so, even though Georgia is opening up. I do want to highlight that doctors in the UK are really warning other medical providers that we are going to see major psychological impact, not just on the individuals who've had and recovered from COVID, but on the clinicians, the medical care providers, the frontline service workers, fire department, police department, paramedics, the nurses and the doctors, everybody in the medical field, but also all of us, because of the length of our stay at home and just the lack of knowledge we have. We just still don't know a lot about the virus. Their concern is that there will be a rise in anxiousness, as well as what they call a more risk-averse community. And that leads to PTSD-like symptoms, depression, I don't want to say compulsive behaviors, but they link it to like gambling, shopping, the addictive kind of behaviors, greater alcohol consumption. So, on the front of, COVIDiots. Okay. So again, this is not any judgment or anything, but I'm just going to highlight in Key Largo, there was a bus driver arrested for taking out, I guess, a metal rod, and he swung a metal rod at a bus passenger who was wearing a mask, but answered a phone and pulled down his mask to answer the phone. And the bus driver got mad and swung a metal rod. So that's not funny by any means, but I think it showcases the level of anxiousness and anxiety that professionals in the front line are experiencing engaging with the public community. The bus driver has to make a living. He is driving the bus. He's got greater exposure. Enclosed space leads to higher risk. And we see other bus drivers actually dying of COVID-19. So he was arrested. They charged him for a misdemeanor. And then in Orlando, a Disney camper, I just had to highlight this. Gabriel saw the picture and we read it. A Disney camper was arrested because he apparently walked onto Disney property because nobody's there. And he went to Discovery Island. I don't even know where that is, but he said it looked like a tropical paradise and decided to camp out for like 6 days. So he was arrested and taken off of property. So there you have it. Now, on a more specific note, some states that are starting to reopen, Arkansas, for any of you viewers in Arkansas, and I see we've got folks in Georgia and Fort Myers and Australia. Yay, Australia. And Dubai. We've got friends from all over Texas, North Carolina, New York. Okay. So one of the things like Arkansas, the gyms are opening up on the 5th of May or the 4th of May. I have to change my calendar. I haven't changed that. So that would be, I think, Tuesday, May 4th. Let's see. Let's look at the calendar. Monday. So tomorrow is May 4th. And so gyms in Arkansas are opening. On Wednesday, Arkansas residents can get their hair done. Hair salons are opening. I do want to highlight something that we won't hear anymore about, apparently. The Navy decided on Friday, May 1st, to issue its final reporting about the USS Theodore Roosevelt and the USS Kidd, the naval destroyer I reported about, I think, 5-6 days ago with the COVID cases. So they decided that they're going to stop providing information to the public about it. And as of Friday, the last day of reporting, the USS Kidd, the naval destroyer, they now have 78 confirmed COVID cases. This is an amphibious naval ship. And there are 30% of the crew that have been diagnosed with this. And this is one of these, they're in enclosed quarters. They can't really socially distance. There's no place for anybody to go beyond the ship. And then the last report Friday that we'll know is the Uss Theodore Roosevelt had just over 1,100 cases of COVID. 24% of the crew members on that ship had tested positive and had been diagnosed and infected with COVID-19. So I know there's a lot in the air about that. Captain, he kind of flew outside the bounds of normal kind of naval procedures, but clearly at 1,100 cases, he had I would consider just cause. That's my 2 cents. So sorry, you guys, I just throwing that out there. And he himself had tested positive with COVID. So I want to highlight some research. So you guys know I'm always pulling research before we go into the heart, the blood pressure management specific related information. So I want to pull some information that just came out from Harvard this week about air quality, or really truly air pollution, and its relation to the COVID-19 mortality. So there was actually a report that was run by the Harvard School of Public Health. Gosh, it's really annoying when people message me while I'm on. Okay, so sorry, I get text messages sometimes from folks, and I know everybody knows I go live at 9. So my apologies. So this is what the report shows, that essentially the cities that have higher levels of air pollution, so are more congested cities. So we can kind of, look at more congestion, more people, greater population, more enclosed spaces. So buses, cars, trains. There's a measurement that if there's 1 gram more per cubic meter in particulate matter. So 1 gram is not really a whole lot when it comes to particulate matter, but when it's in the air, it's quite a bit. They identify that those areas specifically are dealing with a 15% increase in the death rate. So the air pollution directly corresponds to air quality and the lung process. So, we do know that the COVID-2, this particular virus, does attack the lungs. So if you live in an area or community where there's poor lung or poor air, high air pollution, poor air quality, then that does impact your breathing, your bronchial the clearance of your bronchioles and your lung capacity due to air pollution. So they looked at, okay, what's the connection? And I had actually hypothesized this in the very beginning when we were learning more about what was happening in China. And I remember watching, I think, a news piece and looked at Brian and said, well, I've been over there. As many of you know, we actually had an individual who was watching a few days ago who had adopted a child from Wuhan. So she had been over there as well. I just remember it being very smoggy. And I remember every day after I'd be out and about, I remember like these little creases in my elbow area would be dark and dirty. And like my ears would be dirty. I'd blow my nose and my snout would be dirty. And I remember thinking, gosh, this is just so overwhelmingly like polluted the air, and it was smoggy. I felt the same way when I traveled through some other Southeastern Asian countries. And there's definitely a correlation. And now we are seeing, at least here, the study here in the US with certain states, the quality of air. And they do look at some other factors, like in Atlanta, we have a lot of smog. I mean, Atlanta is just insane traffic-wise. My office, my clinical office it's supposed to be 10 or 11 miles away from my home. That should ordinarily take like 20, 25 minutes. It could take me an hour and a half on a good morning to get to the office because of the degree of traffic. So that has a direct correspondence to the outcome. and the severity of the impact of the lungs on the cases. So I just put that out there. I thought that was really interesting. Now, the other thing, I just want to notate that this is really, really, really new on the research front. So we don't have a lot to really make major substantial claims, but it definitely was highlighted in a research article. So recently there was in Nature, the major publication. I've highlighted a few of their articles here, actually this week. There is a new study that they highlight, comes out of UCSF, so University of California, San Francisco. They look at, so their Quantitative Biosciences Institute is the one that led this research, and they pull in a ton of scientists. They even work with the School of Medicine at Mount Sinai in New York, and they also work with the Institut Pasteur in Paris. And so all of these kind of brain resources come together, and they start to look at, the title of the research is Point to Drugs with Potential to Fight COVID-19. And it's a new blueprint, if you will. So that's not really technically the title of it. But so what they've identified is they look at all of the different resources, all of the different medications under study. And they look at the impact, the antiviral impact. There are 2 modulators specifically that they're targeting that they've identified have antiviral impact. So they look at the way the virus is created, or the way the virus is made, how it implants and puts its RNA in people. And what they've identified is these sigma-1 and sigma-2 modulators are what needs to be addressed to lower the antiviral activity. So they've done all this research. They focus on vaccines and antiviral medications. And things that I found really interesting in this is the big thing they're trying to identify are drugs currently on the market that address and target these sigma-1, sigma-2 receptors, because the idea is that you could then increase the greater antiviral activity, potentially in a lab setting, but maybe outside of it in a human setting. So they actually caution against one over-the-counter regular use item because they show it's a cough suppressant. So it's an underlying cough suppressant, dextromethorphan. You're going to find it'll either be labeled DM or DXM, and it's in Robitussin, it's in Dayquil, it's in Delsym. I wrote down all the ones. Some of the TheraView products, the Triminic. You guys know we don't use any of these particular items in our catalog here, but just FYI, what the study showed in very specific lab. So it was under study in a, let me see, I wrote this down. It in a petri dish. So not in human and not in any type of specific setting like they've done some monkey trials. But what they found was this particular medication, the compound that's in cough suppressants acts on the sigma-1 receptor, but not in the positive way they had hoped. What they find is that it actually promotes viral infection. So this was in strictly lab-oriented experiments. They haven't extended this out. But they use caution. They say it needs additional research. I'm trying to see if I had highlighted, I read the whole thing. I want to find the specific detailing on it. But they looked at a multitude of different compounds on cells. And the interesting thing to note with that is think about everybody who gets any type of bronchial respiratory situation. What are they taking? They're taking Dayquil, they're taking NyQuil. I know that initially there was this huge fear and crazy freak out about potentially was ibuprofen versus acetaminophen, were there differences in terms of how the virus reacted? So this might be a true situation where there might be a lot of people who are taking these cough suppressants, and it may, it's not entirely founded in a human state, but we see through this study that the cough suppressant dextromethorphan acts on sigma-1 receptors, promoted viral infection in the lab experiments. So that's really heavy stuff. And I'm gonna look out for more of that. But I think that's really important to note, that if you have in your arsenal and use that type of medication. I know a lot of people do take NyQuil just to sleep at night. And so, a much better option, safer option, if you do have any risk factors, would be to switch to a sleep, REM sleep. So that blueprint, so the blueprint is actually the blueprint of how SARS-CoV-2 hijacks human cells. So that's the name of the study. And I'll post those. It's actually listed in the UC San Francisco. It's online, then you can link specifically to the PDF. So I hope that's helpful, you guys. Let's go into today's topic. Specifically, we're going to talk about natural ways to lower and manage blood pressure levels and some of the underlying components to consider if that is something that you are dealing with. I sit here, I'm drinking my caffeine. This is my keto coffee this morning, but I don't know if you guys have noticed, I've been trying to not drink so much caffeine because I definitely feel like the stress of our kind of situation is definitely plaguing my body. As I think for all of us, we are all dealing with an unprecedented situation, and all of us are feeling this with our families and our lives. We had Brian's parents over yesterday in the backyard in a socially distancing format, and it was so weird, and like literally no hugs and like waves goodbye, air hugs, very, very strange. So, and this is impactful for low, but I'm really going to target high because the hypertension is where we see the most impact, particularly in the cases with COVID in the hospital setting. So what I want to kind of do is highlight 6 to 7 aspects that we need to address. And, these are one of the most important components that you want to work closely with your cardiologist. If you have high blood pressure and you have a GP who's prescribing heart medications, you need to make sure that you have a cardiologist in your medical staff, because this is an underlying current for heart disease, and it might be an indicator of early stages of heart disease. I think a lot of individuals across the globe, and one of the reasons why this hits so many of us so hard, is that it's not routine to go see a cardiologist like a GP and OBGYN on an annual basis. Generally, people meet a cardiologist when they're in the hospital, they're having a heart attack. That we need to eliminate and eradicate in our world if we're going to overcome this as one of the major underlying components for fatalities. But then we see it couples up with a virus like coronavirus, and it becomes even more fatal. So I put that out there. If you don't and haven't made arrangements, obviously, now may not be the time you want to start to do that, but definitely do consider, as you are gathering your medical resources, you should, if you are dealing with any low or high or being medicated, you need to be under the care of a cardiologist. We want to make sure you're doing all of the scans, the echocardiograms, and making sure your carotid arteries are checked, and all of the kind of diagnostics that generally you won't get in a setting at an OBGYN or GP or an internist office. Go to the specialties, because the specialties are going to have equipment. It's going to be part of it. Also for insurance, they can require some of these as they're managing or monitoring your medication, and you are going to be at least armed and equipped with the information of where you are, and then you can even see the progression in the positive way as you start to manage this. So let's talk about magnesium. Magnesium was one of my favorite things, and I drink this a lot on the daily, and I also take other medications, or not medications, but other supplements over the counter that have assortments of magnesium. But you definitely want to make sure, if you are lacking in magnesium and you have some blood pressure component, and lacking meaning you're not taking it daily, then you need to definitely look at adding that to your program. The other thing too is increasing your potassium levels. A lot of times dietary components can be a factor, and we'll get into the dietary components as well, but there can be an imbalance in sugar or salt levels and potassium and also magnesium. So you want to make sure a good, strong multi-mineral is part of your daily practice. Eating nuts and seeds, you can get good minerals. Also, eating sweet potatoes, that's a good way of getting the, yams, getting a good multi-mineral dose. But then also supplementing with magnesium, eating, at least a banana or two a day are going to be helpful in leveling out some of those imbalances. A lot of research shows that adding fish oil, omega fatty acids to your diet are very powerful at lowering the oxidative stress that can cause the tightening of the blood vessels. So that is one thing I want to highlight. One of my favorite foods for the kind of tighten of the blood vessels, and that gives you the certain pressure that people experience. Basil actually has a compound in it. It's how do I say it? Eugenol, EUGNOL. And eugenol is a very it's a supportive compound that actually blocks certain other chemicals that might cause the tension and tightness of the vascular channels, the blood vessels. So when it blocks that, it allows for relaxing to occur. And that's also the other thing too. Magnesium is very relaxing. So it relaxes and releases sometimes the tension. A lot of times people who have Charlie horses or like muscle cramps, magnesium's the go-to to release that. We also have to think our heart is a muscle. So, that is another factor we have to treat like a muscle group. And so magnesium, good mineral balancing is going to be key to relaxing that muscle. So the other thing, increasing the activity levels is very important for just moving the blood. So blood stasis is definitely a term that we use in Chinese medicine where, there's stagnancy in the blood. And we want to get that moving. Cardiovascular, 30 minutes a day is what is recommended. This can be achieved by walking. It could be achieved by, high impact cardio at home, rebounding. You guys know I recommend that a lot. And that really, rebounding is one of these things you're like, oh, me jumping on a trampoline, how hard could that be? But the reality is, and comment any of you who rebound, it is very like heart pumping. I mean, 10 minutes is equivalent of about a 50-minute run, which, if you're like many of us, we don't have 50 minutes of time to run anymore. And so it's a good, quick cardio impact, but it also is good for the lymphatics. So clearing the lymphatics also helps the blood pressure, or the pressure itself. There's a particular type of pressure that moves toxic waste out of the bloodstream and moves it into the lymphatics. That pressure is lowered when we move our lymphatics. So rebounding gives you the cardio boost, but also helps the detoxification of toxic matter in the blood flush out more easily into the lymphatics. So very, very impactful. Love the rebounder. And you look at kids, like they bounce on trampolines for hours. If you have a trampoline in your backyard, get on it daily, 10 minutes, awesome. And you're harnessing your inner child, which is joyful. Now, at the core of what I want to talk about is often missed. And I can speak from my own experiences because this is the one kind of health condition that plagues my life. And it is something that is genetically oriented. I fight against my genes as much as I can, but sometimes we're predisposed. So I want to highlight the role stress, hormone, cortisol plays on your blood pressure management. And this is high blood pressure and low blood pressure. So for all of you watching who have low blood pressure, that's an adrenal component. That is traditional of some degree of adrenal fatigue or adrenal burnout at a max level. So addressing your cortisol levels, meaning get them tested. And blood serum is not the best form of testing your cortisol. the most accurate is going to be saliva. And so you can do, and I have links down below because we do these test kits all the time. And these are home test kits. But you do an adrenal saliva. It's a home collection test. And you literally spit in a vial. And we collect the vial, so we get half of the spit. You know, the bubbles and stuff all settle. So we get half of a vial. And we analyze your cortisol level. And we do that in the morning where it should be its highest. We do it at lunch, at dinner, right before bed. And it gives us a chart, a readout of your cortisol. The cortisol has a direct link to blood pressure levels. And it is always missed. It is always something that is never analyzed by a cardiologist. For sure, you're not going to see a lot of your clinicians addressing stress. They might test thyroid a little bit, but underlying blood pressure management is cortisol. And you have to think about right now, this pandemic, I've talked about, we are under the most extreme type of human related stress, and it's survival. We are all in survival mode. Survival mode turns us into dealing with this fight or flight system. The fight or flight system, our adrenal glands, these two little, they're like tortilla shaped little glands that sit above the kidneys. So mid back, if you feel kind of muscular, deeper pain, that is one thing that can be a factor. And I see the real Charlie Orange. I went to the hospital for days and they did not check my cortisol. Yeah, it is chronic and it is critical. I mean, if we don't measure human fight or flight when we are dealing with stressful situations, hormonal imbalance, neuroendocrine imbalances, depression, we deal with inflammatory situation, histamine reactions, allergies, digestive imbalances, heart arrhythmia or irregularities of the heartbeat and heart rhythm. It's critical that we go deeper. And so one of the things that I do as a naturopathic physician, I look at the whole entire body as a whole. And then we look at, okay, what are the underlying causes and conditions that are the factors behind the symptoms? High blood pressure, heart rate heart palpitations, big time indicator of adrenal, where it's like little heart flutters. And I've had them, I get them, and it's an indicator those are my adrenals, because now I have been tuned in over 20 years of being tuned into my adrenal glands and their role on my body, that when I get that, it's like, well, okay, we need to definitely address the adrenal glands. And for me, that's the indication I always need to get my testing done just to stay on top of it. And ideally, cortisol, you want to test every 6 to 9 months. And then we take a course of action of evaluating. If you're too low, you might need a glandular. Basically, when cortisol is so low, there's a multitude of actions, factors. So sometimes we actually need the cardiologist or the nephrologist to do scans of the adrenal gland. We need to rule out any tumors or nodules. And that's something you probably don't hear about. We know we have nodules and tumors on our thyroid. Well, guess what? We also have the cysts on our ovaries, and men will have prostate nodules and little cysts on their prostate. Well, expect the same in the adrenal, in and around the adrenal gland. We have no sort of standardization within the medical community where we test the adrenal glands. There's no kind of one doctor that you go see to do that. And so that's where a lot of times functional medicine practitioners like myself and naturopaths, that's a core of what we're doing, because one is getting missed, but most importantly, it's an underlying factor. When we're in survival mode or fight or flighting, from a divorce, a death in the family, pandemic, loss of job, health crisis, inflammatory states, autoimmunity, those are all physiological factors. All of those contribute to the fight or flight and the adrenal glands getting burnt out. And there's an assortment of hormones. Sometimes we need to test the aldosterone, which is a particular hormone like cortisol that comes from the adrenal glands. Sometimes that's too high and can be indicative of a tumor or a nodule. The other thing that we will see is that there can be autoimmunity of the adrenal glands. Cushing's disease, you guys might be familiar with that. Addison's disease is another one that falls in that category. Kathy says, how do you treat tumors on the adrenal gland? Well, first it has to get diagnosed. So there are diagnostics. This is not a guessing factor. We most of the time you run really extensive adrenal hormone panel. In that case, that's mostly going to be serum in its relation, but we can get some of those values from saliva as well. I use different labs for really specialized adrenal kind of imbalances. But the one thing that we address is, and depending on the tumor, sometimes it's as mild as just lowering the stress levels, addressing, blocking the enzymes that are converting cortisone to cortisol. So a lot of folks don't realize cortisone, which is an anti-inflammatory, calmer, nerve tonic, when we're in fight or flight and we're under stress, the body converts cortisone to cortisol. So that's where we see people increase in their pain levels, which I always recommend my 3-letter herbal for that, really intense pain. But we see, pain intolerance, we see inflammation, joint fluid, joint retention, arthritic conditions. So treating it depends on the type of tumor size, location. Some are surgically removed, some are monitored. It just really kind of depends. So there's no sort of kind of set standard protocol for an adrenal tumor. It has to be individualized based on the person, because the location can either be inside or outside. We have 2 parts to the adrenal gland. It's a little triangle, and there's another little internal triangle. So the internal addresses neurotransmitter health. So some folks that have chronic depression and even pituitary related imbalances, it could be from a tumor on the adrenals or a tumor on the pituitary gland. And I've had a lot of folks that I've said, okay, I think we need to send you out and have you see this specialist and let's analyze your pituitary gland. Sure enough, they've got a pituitary gland tumor. And there's that pituitary hypothalamus adrenal, it's called the HPA axis. There's a hormone connection between all of those glands. So one of the things that I really want to dig into today is cortisol excess is a major undercurrent for high blood pressure levels. And so let's talk about that. And if you guys watch all of my lives, I've probably done 10 of our 8-week live shows, daily live shows on stress. So I have a catalog of them. Feel free to binge watch at your leisure. Usually the 30-minute mark is where I get into the meat of the topic for our live show. But you can dig into certain compounds. I've talked about a lot of them, so I won't dig into that further. I'll let you assess for yourself what topic might be most important stress-wise. But do know that when we have high cortisol, we have high blood pressure, we also have high insulin levels. So there's a correlation between blood sugar levels and blood pressure. And that is all about fight or flight. So when the body elevates blood sugar levels, it's getting energy powered up to run. So, we're going to be running from the tiger that's chasing us, or we're in crazy, hunting for toilet paper mode because we're in a pandemic state and you can't find toilet paper or meat or whatever it is. So that triggers this instantaneous kind of firing to your cells. So that's where the need for high cortisol gives us an insulin boost. This is a caveman system of hardwiring that has not changed. Technology has changed, but our hardwiring has not. And it really won't evolve because this is our natural instinctual way of survival. So we have that factor, high insulin, and sugar. So not just dietary sugar, but insulin sugar. So glucose levels that are elevated, insulin. YouTube is buffering. Sorry, you guys. I don't know why. It says the connection's unstable. So hopefully you guys can see me. So one of the things that partners up with high cortisol is also going to be a need to evaluate glucose insulin levels, because those will be indicative of glucose intolerance, insulin resistance. There's an underlying cascade of heart disease that yields or comes from all of those factors. So one of the big things, cortisol excess is a huge factor. So it becomes important that you do test on an annual basis. You consider testing your adrenal stress levels. So cortisol is a 4-panel test. So we test morning, afternoon, evening, and dinner. And then there's another hormone called DHEA, or we label it the lab, it's DHEA-S, meaning saliva. So we can evaluate your DHEA levels, and that will tell us more about how extensive has the cortisol excess or deficiency been. And then in DHEA, that level, if it's low, it'll be indicative of low testosterone for men. It'll be indicative of low progesterone and even low estrogen for men and women. So a lot of times my patients that I work with, they come into the clinical setting and they say, I've got all these hormonal imbalances and I've been diagnosed with a fatty liver and I have high blood pressure and I have heart palpitations and I have brain fog. We start to assess. We do an adrenal stress test. And a lot of times we can balance out a lot of those by just resolving cortisol. Instead of masking it with a medication or 2 medications, and now you're retaining water, and now you need a steroid, an anti-inflammatory or a water pill. We quickly evolve to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 medications based on one kind of core underlying imbalance, and that's cortisol. The stress hormone is out of whack. So this is these kits. I'm seeing some questions. So these kits are available in my store. I have links down below, but you can go to naturalhealthresources.com. You can go to shop, and then you click in clinic store. There's also test kits. So there's different links to get to where you need to go. But that's $195. It's an out-of-pocket cost, primarily because this is considered preventative medicine. So, the way the insurance works, it's out of my hands in terms of, why they don't cover a really core component of our health situation. But that is what it is. But adrenal glands, for you all, I've highlighted, I'm addressing my adrenals. So, right now in my catalog, and I think I've posted a few of these, I'm taking my cortisol reset, cortisol stress reset. I am on my Reloraplex, which is awesome. This is a really good compound when we need to lower cortisol levels. I'm also on a rhodiola, and I'm also taking Moringa for stress, immunity, and Moringa. Actually, I've highlighted Moringa in quite a bit of my video content. Moringa is this beautiful kind of tropical tree that the leaves themselves have some pretty spectacular ways of decreasing the blood pressure levels by improving the NO levels, so the nitric oxide levels in our body. That decreases that pressure and tension in the vascular channel. So there's all different types of layers that we can address. But for any of you who are sitting here dealing with high blood pressure, because it's so individualized, there's so many different things in terms of compounds, herbals, supplements that you could treat and use to address and naturally resolve and balance your blood pressure, be it low or high. The underlying component we have to look at are your adrenal glands. And, we tend, as humans, to say, oh, we're okay. We're under stress, but it's all good. We're just mentally, we're dealing with it. We're plugging through. There's a lot of social things like, always ask for help. And like, we're stronger if we're balancing everything, and like, you're doing it all. And the reality is that our bodies and our brains are not equipped for how fast, particularly in our lives, technology has evolved and all of the things we're dealing with. And, very rarely do we slow down. We take time out. I'm definitely really bad at this. I'm not going to be sitting on some high horse, like telling you. I find it hard to relax and take time out because I always find there's something to do, and distraction, and, breathing, yoga practices are really key. Dietary changes and tweaks, lowering, the sugar intake, lowering your salt intake. But a lot of the folks that I work with, and this is just from my practice, the scope of those individuals I work with, they tend to be beyond, a doctor saying, oh, just, eliminate your sugar and run more and exercise. they're already doing that, and it's still an underlying factor, and they get frustrated. And then there's this level of anxiety and angst, and then like it goes up. And then if you have, like I always have had, the white coat syndrome, you know, I get stressed out even thinking of like a blood pressure cuff on my arm. And so that doesn't help matters as well. And so, you know, particularly here, like the cardiologists that I have, they're part of Emory, and they're close to the clinic, but like getting there is a god awful nightmare in traffic. And I swear I have to allow time to kind of decompress because that's a whole nother factor. So, you know, one of the things I really want to, in this particular video, because we know that patients who have COVID, when they're hospitalized, we see across the board, and this is across all ethnicities. You know, Georgia here, 82% of our cases are African Americans. The Black population in Georgia is getting hit hard with it. And out of that population, 65% of them have hypertension that are in that hospitalized state. And we see this across the board in the US, we see this in Italy, we see this in China. So these underlying health conditions and health concerns are a major factor. And with hypertension, there's also the cytokine storm is triggering that. But I'm going to tell you the trigger, and I didn't print out the details on this for you, but there's definitely research about it. One of the things that they're seeing, the major triggers of the cytokine storm, I've highlighted in a few of my videos. The trigger is actually the insulin level. So diabetics, the level of blood sugar is what kicks off that hyper inflammatory state. And then you see the blood pressure rise. So if we look at that from the cortisol factor, the patient more than likely is already dealing with a cortisol component. And then you have the stress of it. So there's physiological stress of being sick, of not getting enough oxygen, of coughing, of not sleeping well. And then you go into hospital and you're not sleeping well because you've got, you know, you're all hooked up and you're not breathing, you're stressed because you're isolated. You know, there's a lot of emotional, mental, and physiological stressors on the body. Those can all potentially trigger the insulin levels to increase because of the cortisol increase. So that could very well be an underlying component for those individuals seeing a greater kickoff. But we do know that insulin and the diabetic, the blood sugar imbalances is an underlying component that is triggering that cytokine storm that then elevates everything. And so if you already are going in an elevated state and you're stressed, you're going to be further stressed. You're more a stressed out, cortisol high, cortisol excess body is already on the scale of it's already overwhelmed. So anything else, just a little drop of something overwhelming could put it over the edge. So the scaling of sensitivity is much greater when you're in that cortisol excess. So it could just be the thing that just tips the scale. But we do know for sure the diabetic blood sugar imbalances triggers the cytokine storm. And then you've got underlying aspects like high blood pressure, arrhythmia. And two, I had somebody ask on the poll that I posted on the community tab here or over on YouTube. So Facebook, I post polls all the time on YouTube. On Instagram, I usually do it in the stories. One of the things that people were wanting more information about was the blood clotting factor and what was going on with that. And I actually did do a video on that, so you can go and specifically watch that. I highlight that further. But I also want to highlight something, and I will link to this. This is just on Amazon. I've worked with Naturopath before. They're a really great company in terms of some of the unique supplementation they have. They have this French maritime pine bark that's pretty spectacular, and it helps to support your immune system. It has different flavonoids in it that are going to be very good for lowering inflammation, but it also can help support vascular health. So this is also something that could be a good compound. Now, always, my disclaimer is if you are on any type of medication for blood pressure, thinning of your blood, if you're on any type of clotting medication, always call your doctor's office and talk to your pharmacist before taking any compounds, because this is such an intricate intricate balance that herbs and compounds like minerals and SAMe and even glandulars, they're just as potent as powerful as a pharmaceutical, and we need to treat them that way. So you want to be very cautious and make sure you work with a professional and consult your doctor, consult your pharmacist when trying to add in other items. I will say this is the most powerful way for you to analyze a major underlying component that's controlling your blood pressure, either keeping it way too high in cortisol excess or keeping it way too low because you've completely flatlined and you're not manufacturing any cortisol. And you can actually go from being really high and burn your adrenals out and crash burn. And then cortisol too, you can be really high at night. I had a lab come back recently where the individual was really high at night, and I didn't know the situation. I'm like, okay, you're probably experiencing X, Y, and Z. The individual is like, yes, I am. Cortisol can tell us a lot. It can tell us if you're dealing with insomnia, frequency of urination at night, if you're dealing with glucose intolerance, if you're dealing with any type of liver-related imbalances, hormonal imbalances, depression, anxiety. So it is very powerful. And adrenal glands they are not going to be an overnight change. So I just want everybody to have really clear expectations that if you have cortisol excess or really low cortisol or some degree of imbalance, it is not something that is just overnight a quick fix to resolve. We are chronically dealing with stress every day, even outside of a pandemic. But this pandemic state and the quarantine and staying at home and the economic burden and financial loss, the grief of life changing, unknowns, anxiety, fear of our health, the fear of an unknown virus out and about, not enough testing, all of this is so overwhelming. It just is really, really important that every day you take actions to support your adrenal glands. And that in turn will help you balance your blood pressure management. But testing is key. It's critical to know where those values are, because then you can address other underlying health conditions like diabetes, which is a big one for this virus. So stress is huge. Cortisol is a big, big underlying component. So I want to take some questions here. And then on Sunday mornings, I'm trying to commit to about an hour for our show because it is Sunday morning breakfast time. And I'm going to take some photos for all of you, Instagram stories. Watch out. I'm going to share with you where we're at with my garden. My garden's got all of the last bits of the fencing, and I've got the wiring. Brian put all the wiring up, and he put together one of my freestanding elevated boxes. I'm going to plant my kale and some lettuce today. So we're really excited, and we saw the first king snake of the season. The dogs freaked out. It's a little 4-foot snake. They're good ones. They're the good, positive ones. They have stripes on them. Freaks me out, but they're good. And we have a bird nesting in our garage, and they really went to town on their nest yesterday. And then we closed the door on them. I'm concerned about these birds. So check that out over on Instagram. Okay, so let's see. Basketball fan says, thing about me is all my symptoms go up and down. I was in the hospital before. I go way up, then down, but I always write myself. Cortisol was what they mentioned. Oh, good. Yeah, so cortisol is something that a lot of times it's not even addressed. And some CBC panels, the blood serum panels that you do for your normal general checkup, they will pull one cortisol value, and then they'll kind of give you a range depending on if you were fasting or whatnot. But the serum is not accurate. Serum is unfortunately not always the most accurate version for us to measure even our cholesterol levels, because if you're constipated, you're going to have more free roaming cholesterol, and it doesn't give us a bigger picture of how many particles are truly in the mobile state or they're just detoxing. All right, so let's see. I have been a roller coaster with vitamins and minerals to take other than just one single one. Needing B, C, and not A. What multivitamin is better? I actually recommended the other day the one that I love, the Healthy Cell Pro. This is a morning and evening dose, and it's equally balanced in terms of the nutrients, but it also addresses cortisol. It addresses, it has amino acids, enzymes, probiotics, prebiotics. It addresses our cell regulation, our DNA It's pretty amazing. So Instagram, you guys are going to drop off, follow my stories, come back tomorrow for 9 a.m. And I'm really grateful for all of you who joined. See you tomorrow. All right, so sorry guys, let me take them offline. Let me save that. Okay, so Facebook, you guys were fully charged last night, so you're going to stay with me until the end. But I just want to answer any questions. So, hey, I don't know if Lori and Andrea are still on, but love you ladies. Let's see, Lori Ann. Let's see, my doctor was freaking. I told him to calm down, that he was working me up. Oh gosh. Always fun. Okay. Yeah. So white coat for sure. Lori Ann, one of the things that we found, I highlighted the other day, for me, what works is laying on the left side. And this is also true. Like if you do have any blood pressure challenges, left side is a very relaxing state for the blood pressure. When I was pregnant, the whole thing, they'd have me lay on my left side for like 10 minutes and I could drop my numbers. I could go from like a 160 over like 110. It was pretty bad. I could drop it to not 118, but I could drop it to like 126 over 85. So that is one factor. There's also other elements to think about, like our spinal alignment, how our body is aligned, neck, cervical, because of the electrical components that, run down the spine and our central nervous system. They're signaling not just to the thyroid, but also to the heart. So making sure you're doing neck exercises and doing good back exercises, strengthening your back, good posture. Foam rolling is a big thing. I find to be helpful in just keeping with that good spinal alignment. But yeah, white coat syndrome for sure. Okay, so let's see. And for any of you who do decide to order the tests, the way that works with the labs when you order these, we send these out to you. The mail's been running really slow. So it might take 5 or 7 days to get to you, even with like a 2 or 3 day UPS or USPS postal. This is, you take this at home, you send it into the lab, and then when you get your test results, usually it's 2 full weeks, they send you the results. And so I don't get those because of the way the arrangement is with non-clinical patients. They send it directly to you. So it's very much a kind of retail engagement, but I can review those, and a lot of folks will set up appointments and things like that. It's just really hard right now with appointments to kind of go over all of that. But I've had people email me, and I'll do a quick little email snapshot and some recommendations. So super, super easy to do. But it does give you a really good idea for what's going on. Let's see, Florinda, I am in North. So Florinda asked where I'm located. So we live in Roswell, Georgia, and my clinic is in Sandy Springs, which is just outside the perimeter at the 285-400 corner, a crazy, like insane death trap of a highway interchange. And we're really close to the 2 big hospitals there. Let's see. I don't see any other questions. Lorraine from Miami, can you provide a list of all the supplements you take yourself daily? Yeah, it kind of varies, kind of depending, but right now I'm on pro stress balancing, pro cortisol balancing right now. Just because I'm feeling it just like all of you. And 2, I'm going 8 weeks on preparing for these shows, and it's a lot of work. And then, momming and homeschooling has been quite overwhelming. So, we're all getting through it. But I will tell you, for all of you who love these earrings and love my keep calm and socially distant, I love the little fox. He's like so zen. I don't know if you guys can see this on Facebook, but you can get these down below in the description box. Facebook, I will put and post all of those details for you all and when this wraps. But I just want to thank you all for your time. I won't take up any more of your time. I hope this was helpful. Definitely do consider, when you do see your doctors or clinicians, have conversations about your cortisol, get tested, grab test kits if you want from us. I'm more than happy to help you out in that category. And appreciate your time. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Happy Sunday. And I will see you all tomorrow. Facebook, I'll see you next Saturday. Bye, everybody. See you later.